There are secrets that churches keep better than their own prayers. Secrets whispered in empty confessionals, hidden behind perfect smiles on Sundays, buried under layers of hymns and hallelujahs. My secret had a first name, a last name, and the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen in my life. Gabriel Mendes. His name was a divine irony. The most perfect angel in heaven shared his name with the boy who would make me know hell, and discover that sometimes hell can look a lot like paradise. But I'm starting from the end. Let me go back to the beginning, to the day everything changed. To the day I, Lucas Ferreira, 17 years old, a staunch atheist and proudly out of it to my liberal family, stepped into the Pentecostal Church of Soul Rescue for the first time. And no, it wasn't by my own free will. You will do this work, Lucas. I'm not asking, I'm informing you. Professor Mariana slammed her folder on the table so hard that half the class jumped in their seats. I just rolled my eyes, crossing my arms over my chest. Sociology in the last period on Friday was torture enough. Now she wanted me to do fieldwork on religious institutions and their role in shaping community identity. Translation: spend a month attending a church. With all due respect, Professor, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, doesn't that violate, the separation of church and state? Religious freedom? Something in the Constitution? You're going to study the institution as a sociological phenomenon, not convert, she replied, adjusting her glasses. And before you complain anymore, I've already chosen your research field. The Pentecostal Church of Soul Rescue. Pastor Gabriel Mendes is very receptive to academic projects. My stomach churned. I knew that church. Everyone in town knew it. It was the biggest, the most conservative, the one that had protests against the LGBT parade every year. The one with those giant signs at the entrance. He created them male and female, and the traditional family is sacred. Professor, I'm gay. That church literally considers me wrong, sinful. That's exactly why you're perfect for the job. She smiled, and I realized I'd fallen into a trap. You'll be able to analyze their discourse with a critical eye. 60% of your final grade, Lucas, and you're at 45 on average. Damn. 3 days later, on a rainy Tuesday in March, I was standing in front of the gate of the Pentecostal Church Rescue of Souls, with a notebook under my arm and my heart pounding. The building was immense, white, with a golden crucifix on top that shone even under the gray clouds. I took a deep breath. It's only a month. For weeks. You can pretend to be straight for 4 weeks. I pushed open the gate, and that's when I saw him. He was watering the plants in the side garden, his back to me. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt that clung to his back because of the light drizzle, faded jeans, and worn-out sneakers. His dark brown hair fell over his forehead, and when he turned around, wow, it was as if someone had taken all my secret fantasies and sculpted them into flesh and blood. Defined jawline, deep brown eyes, lips that looked like they were sculpted by a Renaissance artist. And that smile. Jesus Christ, no pun intended, that smile could convert atheists. Or in my case, make an atheist completely forget how to speak. Hi, he said, and even his voice was unfairly beautiful, warm, and gentle. You must be Lucas, right? The student who's going to do the paper on the church. I just nodded because apparently my brain had decided to go on strike. He dropped the hose and walked over to me, extending his hand. He had calluses on his palms. I noticed when our hands touched. Calluses from someone who works, not someone who only prays. Gabriel Mendes. I'm Pastor Josue's son. My father asked me to show you the church and explain how everything works here. Of course he was the pastor's son. Of course God, whom I didn't even believe in, had this cruel sense of humor. Cool, I managed to say, my voice coming out higher pitched than I intended. Nice to meet you. He smiled again, and I swore I saw the heavens opening. Not the biblical heavens. My own private heavens, full of dangerous and absolutely forbidden possibilities. Come on. I'll show you the temple first. I followed him into the church, trying not to notice how his t-shirt accentuated his broad shoulders, or how he smelled of anise soap and damp earth, trying not to think about how screwed I was. Because there, in that moment, while Gabriel Mendes showed me the varnished wooden pews and spoke about the history of the church with passion in his eyes, I had an absolute certainty. I was completely, irremediably screwed. The first 2 weeks were torture meticulously planned by the universe. I went to church 3 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays for youth group meetings, Sundays for the main service. And on each of those visits, Gabriel was there. Always helpful, always kind, always with that smile that made my stomach churn. And always in the spotlight. Because Gabriel Mendes wasn't just the pastor's son. He was the pastor's son in capital letters. The perfect example. The young man who led prayer groups, who played guitar in worship, who knew the Bible by heart and preached with a conviction that made even my disbelief waver. And that's why we need to be firm in our faith. Guys, he said one Thursday, standing in front of the youth group in the church basement. There were about 20 of us teenagers sitting in a circle in folding chairs. The world out there will try to convince us that sin is normal, that we can give in to the temptations of the flesh without consequences. But we know the truth, don't we? There was a chorus of amen, and that's right, Gabriel. I kept my expression neutral, taking notes in my notebook. Speech on sin and temptation. Emphasis on the separation between us, Christians, and them, the secular world. Siege rhetoric. We have to be the light in the darkness. Gabriel continued, and his eyes swept over the group. For a fraction of a second, they landed on me. Even when it means going against everything society says is right. There was something in the way he said it. An almost imperceptible hesitation. A tension in his jaw. After the meeting, as everyone dispersed, Gabriel came up to me. So, are you managing to collect enough material for the work? Quite a lot, I replied, closing my notebook. Your speech was interesting. Interesting in a good way or interesting in a bad way? He asked, and there was a playful tone in his voice, but also something more. Anxiety, perhaps. Sociologically fascinating, interesting, I said, choosing my words carefully. The way you construct group identity through opposition to an external other is classic Émile Durkheim theory. He blinked. You just nerded my sermon. Technically, it wasn't a sermon, it was a reflection. I corrected, and then, because I had apparently lost all common sense. And yes, I am a nerd. It's my most charming personality trait. Gabriel laughed. A genuine laugh, not that polite church laugh. I don't know if charming is the word, but it's cute. Our eyes met. The basement was empty now, just the two of us under the fluorescent light. The air seemed to grow thicker. He began and then stopped. He ran a hand through his hair, nervous. Can I ask you a personal question? My heart raced. Sure. Why are you an atheist? Like, have you ever believed in God? That wasn't the question I was expecting. I thought for a moment, considering whether I should be honest or diplomatic. I decided on honesty. My mother had cancer when I was 12. I began, and I saw his eyes widen. Leukemia. Everyone prayed for her. The family, the neighbors, even a priest my grandmother brought. They said God would heal her, that all she had to do was have enough faith. I swallowed hard. It was difficult to talk about it, even 5 years later. She passed away on a Tuesday, and I realized that either God didn't exist or he did exist and simply didn't care. In either case, I saw no reason to believe in him. Gabriel was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he put his hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry about your mother, Lucas. Really. And the strangest thing? I believed in him. There was no religious jargon. No, she's in a better place or God had a plan. Just simple human empathy. Thank you, I murmured. We stood there, his hand still on my shoulder, and I could feel the warmth of his palm through my t-shirt. My whole body was hyper-aware of his closeness, the smell of soap and something slightly sweet. Maybe honey, I realized, remembering that I had seen him eating honey cookies earlier. Gabriel. The voice echoed down the stairs. It was a girl from church, Julia if I'm not mistaken. Your father's calling you. His hand moved away from my shoulder as if it burned. I'm coming, he shouted back, and then looked at me. I have to go. But I enjoyed talking to you. Really. I enjoyed it too. I admitted, and it was true. He smiled, that damn smile, and ran up the stairs. I stayed there for a few more minutes, trying to calm my racing heart and ignore the voice in my head that screamed, "Watch out! Watch out! You're entering dangerous territory." But I didn't listen, because the truth is, I had already crossed the border. I just didn't know how far I was willing to go yet. Sunday service was always a spectacle. Pastor Gabriel Mendes wasn't just a religious leader. He was a born performer. Tall, booming voice, dramatic gestures. When he preached, the whole church seemed to vibrate with his words. "Sin is lurking, brothers," he shouted from the pulpit, his arms outstretched as if embracing the entire congregation. "It disguises itself as progress, as tolerance, as love. But we know the truth." I was sitting in the back, as always, observing, taking notes, trying to keep my expression neutral, while the pastor launched into one of his favorite speeches. Gender ideology. They want our children to believe they can choose to be whatever they want. Boys becoming girls, girls becoming boys, marriage between men, between women. He spat the words like poison. But I say, this is wrong in the eyes of God. The church erupted in applause and amens. I clenched my teeth, the pen nearly breaking in my hand. And then my gaze met Gabriel's. He was sitting in the front row with other young leaders, but he wasn't applauding. His hands were clasped in his lap, his knuckles white from the pressure. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. And in that moment, I saw something in him that I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of something inside himself. After the service, there was the typical get-together. Weak coffee, tapioca biscuits, and lots of conversation about soccer and soap operas. I was discreetly slipping away when I felt a hand on my arm. "Lucas, wait." It was Gabriel. He looked around nervously, and then whispered, "Can we talk? In private?" My heart skipped a beat. "Sure. Where?" "There's a place. Meet me in the parking lot in 5 minutes." Before I could answer, he had already walked away, greeting an elderly lady with that perfect pastor's son smile. 5 minutes later, I was in the nearly empty parking lot. A familiar car honked goodbye, and then there was only silence and the midday heat. "Lucas." I turned around. Gabriel was leaning against the side of the church, half hidden by the shadows. He gestured for me to come closer. "Come on. There's a place here that nobody comes to." We followed a narrow path between the church and the wall, until we reached a kind of abandoned garden in the back. There was an old wooden bench, surrounded by overgrown plants and a mango tree that nobody had touched in months. "This is my place," Gabriel said softly, sitting on the bench. "When I need to think, to escape from everything." I sat next to him, leaving a careful space between us. "Is everything all right?" I asked. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "No. Everything's not all right, actually." I stayed silent, waiting. I'd learned that sometimes people just need space to talk. "That sermon my father gave," he began, his voice tense. "You must have thought it was awful, right?" "I think all of your father's sermons are awful," I replied honestly. "But this one in particular was especially aggressive." Gabriel buried his face in his hands. "I hate when he does that. I hate it. But I can't say anything. Can't disagree. I'm the pastor's son. I have to be the example. Even when you don't agree?" He looked at me, and there was so much pain in those brown eyes that my chest tightened. "I don't know what I believe anymore, Lucas. It's like everything I've been taught my whole life is starting to crack. And I'm afraid that if I pull a thread, everything will collapse." I didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone whose entire identity is built on a faith that's crumbling? "Can I ask you a question?" I said carefully. "Why did you start doubting?" Gabriel was silent for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "Because of you." The world seemed to stop. "What?" He turned completely to me now, his eyes shining with something between despair and determination. "Ever since you started coming here, I can't stop thinking about everything my father preaches, about what the Bible says, about what's right and wrong. He took a deep breath. And about you. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Gabriel. No, he interrupted, and there were tears in his eyes now. Let me speak, please, because if I don't speak now, I'll never have the courage again. I nodded, barely able to breathe. I think I'm gay, Lucas. The words came out in a desperate whisper, like a burning confession as it escaped. And I'm terrified, because if this is real, then everything I am, everything I've built is a lie. My father hates me. The church rejects me. God rejects me. The tears were falling freely now, and I acted on instinct. I pulled him into a hug, and he clung to me as if he were drowning and I were the only solid thing in the world. Hey, I murmured into his hair. Breathe. Just breathe. We stayed like that for I don't know how long. Me holding him while he cried silently on my shoulder, years of repression and fear leaking out in muffled sobs. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were red and swollen. I'm sorry, he murmured. I shouldn't have thrown that at you. Don't apologize, I said firmly. Never apologize for being who you are. But I don't know who I am, he said, his voice breaking. That's what terrifies me. I don't know. I took his hand. It was trembling. Then find out. But not alone. I squeezed his fingers. You don't need to have all the answers right now, Gabriel. Nobody does. He looked at our intertwined hands, and I saw something change in his face. Fear giving way to something else. Determination, perhaps. Or hope. I want to find out, he whispered. But I'm scared. Scared of what? He looked up at me, and the intensity of that gaze took my breath away. Scared that when I find out, I won't be able to go back. The weight of those words hung between us, because we both knew what he was really saying. This wasn't just about identity. It was about us. You don't have to decide anything now, I said, even though every fiber of my being was screaming for me to pull him closer. But I'm here. If you want to talk, if you just want not to be alone. I'm here. Gabriel smiled for the first time since we got there. A small, vulnerable, but real smile. Thank you, Lucas. Really. We stood up and walked back in silence. But something had changed between us. A line had been crossed, and we both knew there was no going back. I just didn't know yet how much it would cost us both. The following days were a careful dance of stolen glances and brief conversations. Gabriel and I began meeting in the hidden garden after church events. Never for long 15-20 minutes at most. But in those moments, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. He talked about his doubts, his fears, the things he could never talk to anyone about. And me? I was falling. Quickly and irremediably. It wasn't just physical attraction, although God knew there was that too. It was the way he bit his lip when he was thinking. How he laughed when I made a silly joke. How he looked at the stars when he talked about his dreams. Dreams that didn't involve being a pastor, but traveling, seeing the world, studying architecture. I've always wanted to build things, he said one Thursday, lying on the grass in the secret garden while I sat beside him. Bridges, buildings, houses, things that would last, you know? That would make a difference. Then why don't you study architecture? He laughed humorlessly. My father has other plans. I'm going to seminary next year. To become a pastor like him. It's all decided. But you don't want that. It doesn't matter what I want. He turned to the side, staring at me. That's the part you don't understand, Lucas. When you're a pastor's son, you don't have choices. You are the property of the church, of God. Your life isn't yours. That's cruel. That's sacrifice. He sighed. At least that's how I saw it. Now I don't know anymore. There was a moment of silence, only the sound of crickets and the wind in the leaves. Then Gabriel spoke again. So softly I almost didn't hear. Can I do something crazy? You literally just confessed to me that you're gay in your father's church. I think the ship of sanity has already sailed. He laughed. A real light laugh. Then he sat down, getting very close to me. Crazier than that. My heart was thundering. What? Instead of answering, he leaned in and kissed me, It was brief, a light touch of lips, hesitant and scared. But it was as if the whole world had exploded in colors. My first kiss with Gabriel. My first kiss that really mattered. When he pulled away, his eyes were wide, as if he couldn't believe what he had done. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I didn't let him finish. I pulled him back, and this time the kiss wasn't hesitant. It was urgent, desperate, weeks of tension exploding all at once. My hands in his hair, his on my waist, and for a moment nothing else mattered. Not the church, not the pastor, not the risks. Just us. When we finally separated, we were both breathless. Wow, he murmured. Yeah. Wow sums it up well. He smiled, and it was the most genuine smile I had ever seen on him. Then reality seemed to hit, and the smile disappeared. Nobody can know, Lucas. Nobody. I know. No, you don't understand. He grabbed my hands, his eyes filled with fear. If my father finds out, if anyone finds out, it won't just be bad. It will be catastrophic. He could kick me out of the house, disinherit me. A chill ran down my spine. Your father would do that? I don't know. And there was real panic in his voice. I don't know what he would be capable of if he found out that his perfect son is gay. I held his face with both hands, forcing him to look at me. Then nobody will find out. We're careful. Lucas. The voice echoed from somewhere nearby. It was Julia again. Are you still here? We jumped apart, Gabriel frantically wiping his eyes. Here. I shouted back. Just catching some air. Julia appeared on the path, looking suspicious. And you, Gabriel? Your father is looking for you. I was helping Lucas with some questions about the church, he said softly, and I was impressed by the naturalness of the lie. I'll be right back. Julia looked between the two of us, clearly unconvinced, but just shrugged. Okay, don't be long. When she left, Gabriel looked at me, and there was sadness in his eyes. That's how it's going to be, Lucas. Lies, secrets, always hiding. I don't care, I said, and it was true. As long as I can be with you, it doesn't matter. You should care. He stood up, brushing the grass off his pants. You deserve someone who can hug you in public, who isn't afraid to be seen with you. I deserve to be with someone I choose, I corrected. And I choose you. For a moment he just looked at me. Then he shook his head, half smiling. You're crazy. Probably. He leaned in quickly, stole one last kiss, and ran back to the church. I stood there for a few more minutes, my fingers touching my lips, trying to process what had just happened. I had kissed Gabriel Mendes, the pastor's son, and it had been perfect. But the joy was tempered by fear, because he was right. If anyone found out. I didn't let the thought finish. Instead, I took a deep breath and went back to the church, putting on my neutral, observant student mask. But as I walked past the temple and saw the gleaming golden crucifix, I couldn't help but think, if this was a sin, why did it feel so right? The following weeks were the best and worst of my life. Gabriel and I became masters of disguise. We developed a whole code language. Brief touches on the shoulder meant, I'll meet you in the garden in 10 minutes. Specific glances meant, it's not safe today. Seemingly innocent text messages had hidden meanings. Gabriel at 10:47 p.m. Hey, that verse from John you asked about. It's chapter 3, verse 16. Translation, I love you. It's true. Lucas at 10:50 p.m. Thanks. Very useful for work. Thumbs up. Translation. I love you too. See you tomorrow. We stole moments wherever we could. Quick kisses behind the church when we were sure no one was looking. Hands intertwined hidden under the table during Bible studies. Whispered conversations in the darkness of the secret garden. But there was a price. Gabriel was getting more and more tense, paler. I could see the weight of the lie eating him up inside. I preached last Sunday, he told me one night, his head on my shoulder as we hid behind the instrument room. About purity. About resisting the temptations of the flesh. Gabriel. And as I was speaking, I looked at you at the back of the church, and I thought, I'm a hypocrite. A liar. Everything I say is a lie. I lifted his face, forcing him to look at me. You're not a hypocrite. You're someone trying to survive in a toxic environment. It's the same thing. It's not. I kissed his forehead. A hypocrite chooses the lie. You were forced into it. But I could see that my words didn't convince him. Guilt was devouring him. And things got worse when Julia started to suspect. She always showed up at the wrong moments. Always looked with those narrow eyes when Gabriel and I were too close. Always made seemingly innocent comments that had a thread of accusation. You two are always together lately, she said casually during a youth group meeting. Wasn't Lucas's job just to observe? Why do you spend so much time explaining things? Gabriel. I just want to make sure he understands our perspective correctly, Gabriel replied calmly, but I saw his jaw clench. Julia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I hope that's all. When she left, Gabriel pulled me aside. She knows, he whispered, the obvious panic in his voice. Or at least she suspects. She doesn't have proof. She doesn't need it. A suspicion is enough in this place. He ran his hands through his hair. Desperate. Shit. We have to be more careful. We already are careful. Not enough. He stepped back, pacing back and forth. We need distance. For a while. My stomach sank. What? No. Gabriel. It's the only way, Lucas. He looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. If we continue like this, we'll get caught. And when we do, I don't know what will happen to me. He was right. I knew he was right. But every fiber of my being screamed against it. How long? I don't know. A few weeks? Until Julia relaxes. He took a step forward, quickly taking my hand. It's not because I don't want to. You know that, right? I know. But knowing didn't make it any less painful. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pretending we were just casual acquaintances. 2 weeks of Gabriel avoiding my gaze during services. 2 weeks of dry, professional messages about schoolwork. 2 weeks of hell. And then came the Sunday that would change everything. I was in my usual spot at the back of the church when I realized something was wrong. Pastor Joshua was at the pulpit, but he hadn't started the sermon yet. He just watched the congregation with an expression I had never seen before. Anger. Cold, controlled anger. Brothers and sisters, he began, and his voice was different. Low. Dangerous. Today I need to talk about something that breaks my heart. About betrayal. About deceit. About the perdition that infiltrates our midst disguised as a lamb. My stomach churned. No. There is a sinner among us. His eyes swept across the congregation. Someone who smiles and praises on Sundays, but in the darkness surrenders his soul to things that are wrong in the eyes of God. I frantically searched for Gabriel. He was in the front pew, completely pale, his hands trembling in his lap. And the worst part, the pastor paused dramatically. The worst part is that this sinner is someone I trusted. Someone who should be an example. Oh no. Oh God, no. Gabriel. The voice thundered through the temple. Stand up. The silence was absolute. 200 people holding their breath. Gabriel stood up slowly, each movement seeming to cost him everything. His face was as white as paper. My own son. The pastor spat the words with disgust. My own blood. Involved in forbidden relationships. There was a collective cry of shock. People whispering. Some women crying. I stood up without thinking. Wait. You. The pastor pointed at me, and I had never seen so much hatred on a human face. You came here disguised as a student, but in reality you came to corrupt my son. Contaminate him with your perverse influence. That's not how it was. I yelled back, my heart racing. Gabriel did nothing wrong. Silence. The pastor stepped down from the pulpit, walking straight toward Gabriel. The entire congregation watched in fascinated horror. How could you? How dare you bring this shame to this church? To this family? Father, Gabriel's voice broke, and then the pastor did something that froze my blood. He slapped Gabriel across the face. Hard. The sound echoed through the silent temple. No. I ran down the aisle, but churchmen held me back. 3 of them, holding me by the arms as I struggled. Let him go. Let him go. You're not my son anymore, the pastor said, his voice icy. A son of mine wouldn't be this. A son of mine wouldn't choose the path of perdition. Dad, please. Gabriel was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Get out. The pastor pointed to the door. Get out of my church. Get out of my house. You're dead to me. Joshua, wait. A woman who must have been Gabriel's mother stood up, but the pastor silenced her with a look. Are you also going to defend these things that are wrong in the eyes of God? Rachel? Do you want to lose both your sons? The woman sat down, crying. Gabriel looked around the temple, at the people he had known his whole life, the people he had led in prayer, whom he had counseled, whom he had considered family. They all looked at him with disgust, with fear, with condemnation, except one. I looked at him through my tears and silently articulated, I'm sorry. He shook his head minimally. It wasn't my fault. Then he did something I'll never forget. He lifted his head, wiped away his tears, and walked down the aisle with the dignity of a king. The church doors slammed shut behind him with a final bang. And you, the pastor turned to me, the men still holding me. You're going to pay for corrupting my son. You're going to pay for bringing this filth into God's house. I love him, I said, not caring that the whole church heard. And there's nothing wrong with that. The pastor laughed. A cruel, humorless laugh. Love? Love? You don't know what love is, boy. That's lust. Sin. And you're both going to pay for it. Then at least we'll burn together. He gestured to the men. Get him out of here, and spread the word. No church in this city should receive this boy. They dragged me out. I struggled, I screamed, but it was 3 against 1. They threw me onto the sidewalk like trash, and the church doors slammed shut. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I remembered, Gabriel. I ran through the parking lot, down the street, frantically searching. And I found him. He was sitting on the curb 2 blocks away, his head in his hands, sobbing. Gabriel. He looked up, and what I saw shattered me. It wasn't just sadness. It was utter despair. A man who had lost everything in a matter of minutes. He kicked me out, Gabriel whispered. My own father kicked me out. I sat down next to him, and he immediately clung to me, crying on my shoulder as he had done weeks ago in the secret garden. But this time it was different. It wasn't fear of what might happen. It was the devastating reality of what had happened. I have nothing, Lucas, he said between sobs. Nowhere to go. No money. No family. Nothing. You have me, I said firmly, holding him tighter. You'll always have me. How did he find out? Gabriel pulled away, wiping his eyes. How? As if in response, my cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo of Gabriel and me kissing in the secret garden. The photo was blurry, taken from afar, but it was unmistakable. And below a message. You should have been more careful. J. Julia. Gabriel saw the photo on my screen and closed his eyes. Julia. She must have followed us. Took the picture. Showed it to her father. Why? His voice was broken. Why would she do that? I had no answer. Some people simply can't bear to see others happy in ways they don't understand. Gabriel picked up my phone and looked at the photo for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. A small, sad smile. At least we were caught doing something real. It wasn't a lie they discovered. It was the truth. Gabriel. No, he looked at me, and despite the tears, there was a new determination there. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am, pretending, and for a moment with you I was real. He took my hand, and I don't regret it. Even losing everything? I didn't lose everything. He squeezed my hand. I won you. And there, sitting on the curb with our lives crumbling around us, he kissed me. Not a hidden or stolen kiss. A kiss in broad daylight where anyone could see, because there was nothing left to hide. But reality set in quickly. Gabriel literally had nowhere to go. His clothes were at the parsonage. His documents. Everything. Come with me, I said, standing up and pulling him along. My father will understand. Lucas. I can't. Yes, you can. I looked into his eyes. You won't go through this alone. Never again. And for the first time since we left the church, I saw hope in his face. We didn't know what would come next. We didn't know how we would face the world. But we knew one thing: we would face it together. My father, Roberto Ferreira, was a civil engineer, a practical, logical man who believed in concrete data and evidence. An atheist like me, he had raised my sister and me with the philosophy of live and let live. But nothing prepared me for his reaction when I appeared at the door with Gabriel. Dad, this is Gabriel, I began nervously. He needs a place to stay. My father looked at Gabriel, whose face was swollen from crying so much, still trembling, and then looked at me. He read the situation in a second. Come in, was all he said. Inside the house, my sister Sophia, 14 years old, was on the sofa playing video games. She looked up and frowned. Who is this? Gabriel. He's going to stay here for a few days, my father said calmly. Sophia, go prepare the guest room. But now, Sophia. Something in his tone made her not argue. She ran upstairs. My father led us to the kitchen and pointed to the table. Sit down. I'll make coffee. Over the next few minutes, while my father made coffee and put cookies on a platter, Gabriel told me everything. The church, the forced outing, the expulsion. His voice broke at some points, but he got to the end. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then my father simply said, You can stay here as long as you need. Gabriel blinked. Seriously. No boy should be thrown out on the street by the one he loves. My father took a sip of coffee. But let's establish some rules. No sex under my roof. Understood. We both blushed. Dad. What? I'm liberal. I'm not blind. He smiled slightly. And Gabriel, tomorrow we're going to the parsonage to retrieve your things. Your documents especially. You'll need them. My father won't let me. Then we'll take the police. My father crossed his arms. He can't stop you from getting your belongings. They're rightfully yours. Gabriel seemed stunned. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. My father became serious for a moment. Because when Lucas's mother died, the church we attended said it was God's punishment, that she had unconfessed sins. His jaw clenched. Religion can do beautiful things, but it can also do monstrous things. And I'm not going to let another boy suffer because some hypocrites think they own morality. Tears began to fall from Gabriel's eyes again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me. Just take care of yourself and try to rest. My father stood up. Lucas, show him the room. That night, after Gabriel went to sleep, my father called me into his office. You like him? It wasn't a question. Yes. How much? I took a deep breath. Enough to face an entire church for him. My father nodded slowly. Then listen. The next few months are going to be difficult. That church has influence in this city. They're going to make things complicated for both of you. I know. No, you don't know. He looked at me seriously. People are going to talk. They're going to judge. They're going to say horrible things. At school, on the street, online. You need to be prepared. I am prepared. And Gabriel? My father asked gently. He just lost his entire family. The trauma of that, it's not going to go away quickly. Then I'll be there. Always. My father smiled. You're just like your mother. She also had that huge heart that couldn't fit in her chest. He put his hand on my shoulder. Just try not to get hurt too much in the process of saving everyone. I'm not trying to save anyone. No? He raised an eyebrow. Then what are you trying to do? I thought for a moment. To love someone who deserves to be loved. My father pulled me into a hug. Your mother would be proud of you. On Monday, as promised, we went to pick up Gabriel's things. My father took a lawyer friend. Gabriel was a bundle of nerves in the back seat of the car. What if he doesn't let us? Then we have legal grounds to sue. The lawyer, Dr. Martins said calmly. He can't withhold your belongings, especially your documents. When we arrived at the parsonage, there was a small group of church members outside, including Julia, who looked at us with a mixture of defiance and guilt. Pastor Josue came out when we rang the doorbell. He looked at Gabriel with utter disdain. I came to get my things, Gabriel said, and I was proud of how firm his voice was. You don't have things here. You're not my son anymore. Legally, he's still a minor, Dr. Martins interjected, and he has a right to his belongings. We can resolve this amicably or we can involve the authorities. The pastor narrowed his eyes, but opened the door. 5 minutes. Grab your things and get off my property. Gabriel went inside, and I followed him. The house was beautiful, traditional, full of crucifixes and family photos. In every photo, Gabriel was smiling. The perfect son. The perfect lie. In his room, there were more photos. Gabriel as a child holding a Bible. Gabriel as a teenager baptizing someone. Gabriel last Christmas with his family. A lifetime of being someone else. Help me pack, Gabriel said softly, already pulling clothes from the wardrobe. We worked in silence, filling 2 suitcases. Documents, clothes, some personal items. Gabriel hesitated over an old Bible on the bedside table. It was my grandmother's, he murmured. Take it, I said. It's still yours. He took the Bible and also a picture frame with a photo of him as a child with an elderly woman with a kind smile. My grandmother was the only one who never judged me, he said softly. She died last year, but I think she would have understood. When we went downstairs with the suitcases, Gabriel's mother was in the hallway. She looked at her son, tears in her eyes. Gabriel. No, Mom. His voice was cold. You just sat there while he kicked me out. You didn't do anything. I couldn't. Yes, you could. Gabriel walked past her. You chose him. You chose the church. I understand. But don't expect my forgiveness. It was the hardest thing I've ever seen someone do. Walking away from their own mother. At the door, Julia took a step forward. Gabriel, wait. I didn't want it to come to this. He stopped and looked at her. For a long moment, he just stared. Then, you took a picture of a private moment. You showed it to my father. You destroyed me. His voice was calm, but cold. And you did that because what? Because you feel morally superior? Because you wanted to protect the church? I wanted to protect you. Julia exploded. From that boy who was corrupting you. Nobody corrupted me, Julia. Gabriel took a step closer. I've always been like this. I've always known. I was just too scared to admit it. Lucas didn't turn me gay. He helped me accept who I've always been. That's the devil talking. No, it's my voice. For the first time in my life, it's my voice. Gabriel shook his head. And you know what's saddest? You think you're doing God's work. But a God who demands that I deny who I am, that I live a lie, that I suffer just to please him, that's not a God I want to worship. And with that, he got into the car. As we drove back, Gabriel looked out the window in silence. Then quietly, I'm an orphan now. No, my father said from the driver's seat. You have a family. It's just not your biological one. Gabriel looked at me and I took his hand. Chosen family, I said. It's better than blood ties sometimes. He squeezed my hand and finally smiled. The following months were a roller coaster. At school, the news spread quickly. The pastor's son was expelled for being gay with Lucas Ferreira. Some students were supportive. Many were not. They found gay written on my desk. Someone pasted religious pamphlets on my locker. There were whispers in the hallways, laughter as we passed by. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone facing this. Ignore them, Gabriel said one day, when a group of boys made kissing sounds as we passed. They only have power if we give it to them. Doesn't it bother you? It does. He looked at me. But lying bothered me more. Gabriel enrolled in the same school as me. My father got a scholarship through a lawyer, arguing a situation of vulnerability. Gabriel attacked his studies with impressive ferocity. I think it was his way of processing the trauma. And slowly, very slowly, he began to heal. He had bad nights. Nights when he woke up from nightmares about his father. Nights when he cried for hours, questioning whether he had made the right choice. Nights when religious guilt consumed him, and he whispered, "What if they're right? What if I'm an abomination?" On those nights, I held him and repeated the same words. "You are not an abomination. You are human, and I love you." But there were also good moments. The first day he truly laughed again. The first time we held hands in public without him panicking. The first time he said, "I love you" back. And the day he dyed his hair. "I want to change," he said, looking at himself in the mirror. "I want that when I see myself, I see me, not the pastor's son." So we dyed his hair dark red. Sophia helped, making sarcastic comments about our cosmetic incompetence. When we finished, Gabriel barely recognized himself. "It's perfect," I said, and he smiled. "It's me." 3 months after the outing, something unexpected happened. We were at home when the doorbell rang. It was Gabriel's mother. She was thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes. Her gaze met Gabriel's and filled with tears. Can I talk to you?" Gabriel tensed beside me. "I don't know if there's anything to say." "Please. 5 minutes." My father nodded that everything was all right. Then Gabriel reluctantly went out onto the balcony with her. I stayed in the living room, but I could hear through the half-open window. "Your father and I separated," she began. Silence. Then Gabriel, "What?" After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about what he did, about what I did." Her voice was broken, and I realized I spent my whole life blindly following him, his rules, his beliefs, without ever questioning. "And now you question?" "Now I look at my son and see that I preferred the approval of a cruel man to the happiness of my own blood." She sobbed. "Gabriel, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know I failed you when you needed me most. But I wanted you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm so sorry, for not being strong enough to defend you." There was a long silence. Then, "Mom, I can't just forgive and forget. I know. You hurt me. Deeply. I know. But," Gabriel's voice softened, maybe with time, we can try again. Slowly. His mother sobbed harder. Thank you. When Gabriel went back inside, he was crying. But this time they were different tears. Of relief, perhaps. Of a wound beginning to heal. "She wants to try," he said, and I hugged him. "And you?" "I want her to be my mother again." He looked at me. "But it will take time." "We have time," I said simply. But it wasn't all reconciliation. Pastor Josue refused to give in. He started a social media campaign against the gay agenda invading Christian families. He used the tragic story of my wayward son as an example. It was painful, violent, public, and it went too far. Because other voices began to emerge. Other stories. One young man posted, "Pastor Josue sent me to conversion therapy when I was 15. I was traumatized." Another person, "He told my sister that the rape she suffered was punishment for dressing provocatively." More and more stories. Years of emotional abuse and religious manipulation coming to light. The church began to empty. Families leaving. Complaints being made. And Gabriel, surprisingly, became a voice. He started a blog, Prodigal Son, The Journey of an Ex-Evangelical. In it, he wrote about his experience. About religious trauma. About accepting his sexuality. About rebuilding. The blog exploded. Thousands of views. LGBT youth from religious backgrounds commenting, sharing their own stories, thanking him for talking about something so difficult. "You're helping so many people," I said one night, reading the comments with him. "Maybe that's why it all happened," Gabriel murmured. "So I can help others who are going through what I went through." "Do you really think so? In destiny?" He thought for a moment. "I don't know about destiny, but in finding purpose in suffering. Yes. And my purpose now is to ensure that fewer boys go through this alone." I kissed his temple. "You're amazing, you know? I learned from the best." He smiled. "After all, you stayed by my side when everything fell apart." And I'll stay forever. Promise? I promise. And I kept that promise. 1 year. 365 days since that fateful Sunday. So much had changed. Gabriel was different. Lighter. The weight of religious guilt still existed, probably always would, but it no longer consumed him. He had started therapy, my father paid for it, and was processing the trauma in a healthy way. He had gotten excellent grades and earned a full scholarship to study architecture at a federal university. His dream was becoming a reality. His blog had over 50,000 followers now. He received daily messages from young people thanking him, asking for advice, sharing their own journeys. Gabriel had unintentionally become an activist. And us? We were stronger than ever. Of course, we had fights, arguments about silly things and serious things. Gabriel still had triggers, words, situations that took him back to that Sunday. I still had my own baggage, my grief for my mother that sometimes resurfaced. But we always talked. We always apologized. We always chose each other. And on our 1-year anniversary, I planned something special. I took Gabriel back to the secret garden behind the church. I know. Sounds crazy. But there was something poetic about it. Lucas, what are we doing here? Gabriel asked nervously as we crept along the familiar path. Trust me. The garden was different. Grown, wilder. No one had cared for it since Gabriel had left. But the bench was still there, our bench. And on it I had placed something earlier that day. A lit lantern and an envelope. What's this? Gabriel picked up the envelope, confused. Open it. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter. My terrible handwriting covering page after page. Gabriel began to read aloud, his voice growing increasingly emotional. Gabriel, 1 year ago in this garden you kissed me for the first time. And my world changed. Not because you made me gay, I already was. But because you showed me that love is worth any risk. This year, I've seen you broken and rise again. I've seen you lose everything and build something new. I've seen you transform pain into purpose, trauma into strength. And every day, I fall more in love with you. For the way you bite your lip when you're drawing. For the way you sing in the shower even when you're off-key. For the way you hold my hand when you're scared, as if I were your anchor. I can't give you an engagement ring yet, we're too young, it would be kind of dramatic. But I can give you a promise. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, always. In every life, in every possible universe, I choose you. You are not the unforgivable sin, Gabriel. You are my redemption. With all my love, Lucas. When he finished, tears streamed down his face. Lucas, I don't know what to say. Say that you choose me too. He put down the letter, pulled my face to his, and kissed me. A deep, desperate kiss, full of a year of love, struggle, and overcoming. When we separated, he pressed his forehead against mine. I choose you, always. Even with all the mess, all the drama, especially because of the mess and the drama. He smiled through his tears. Because it's ours, our story. And I wouldn't change a thing. We stayed there for hours just talking. About dreams, about fears, about the future. About what it would be like when we were older, when we could really get married, have a house, maybe adopt children someday. Dreams that once seemed impossible. But now they seemed attainable. But not everything was a happy ending yet. There was still a score to settle. Pastor Josue had lost half his congregation, but he still preached his hatred. And when Gabriel was invited to give a lecture at the school on LGBT youth and religious trauma, the pastor decided to show up. The lecture would be in the school auditorium on a Friday night. More than 200 people confirmed their attendance. Students, teachers, parents. Gabriel was nervous, rehearsing the speech for the 1,000th time. Everything will be all right, I said, adjusting his tie. You're amazing. Just be yourself. What if I freeze? What if I forget everything? Then you improvise. I kissed his cheek. But you won't forget. You were born for this. When we arrived at the auditorium, it was packed. And there, in the last rows with a group of church members, was Pastor Josue. Gabriel saw him and froze. He's here. I know. I took his hand. But he doesn't have power over you anymore. Remember? Gabriel took a deep breath and nodded. The lecture began. And Gabriel was transcendental. He spoke about growing up gay in an evangelical church. About the constant fear of being discovered. About the shame he was taught to feel about himself. They told me my feelings were a sin, he said, his voice firm and clear. That I needed to pray to get out of myself. As if love could be cured. As if who I am was a disease. The auditorium was in absolute silence. You could hear a pin drop. But the truth is there's nothing to cure. Being LGBT isn't a disease. It's not a choice. It's not a sin. It's just being. And I deserve to exist. We all deserve to exist without shame. Applause erupted. But then, a thundering voice cut through the noise. Lies. All lies from the devil. Pastor Josue had stood up. My son has been corrupted by these ideas, led astray from God's path. And you are here applauding these things that are wrong in the eyes of God. Gabriel didn't back down. Instead, he looked directly at his father. Father. His voice was calm, but firm. I haven't been corrupted. I've always been like this. You just didn't want to see it. You are my son. You will regret this. No, Gabriel stepped forward. You expelled me. Remember? You said I was dead to you. So don't come here now pretending to be your parental authority. The Bible says many things. Gabriel interrupted. It says not to judge. It says to love your neighbor. It says God is love. But you choose to focus only on the verses that justify your prejudice. The pastor was red with anger. How dare you? I dare because I'm no longer afraid of you. Gabriel shouted back, and the entire auditorium gasped. I spent 17 years of my life in fear. Fear of your disappointment. Fear of your anger. Fear of your God. But not anymore. You will pay for this, then I will pay. Gabriel opened his arms. But at least I will burn for who I really am. And not pretending to be someone you want me to be. For a moment, the pastor was speechless. Then he spat. You are no longer my son. No, Gabriel smiled sadly. For the first time, we agree on something. And then something incredible happened. One by one, people in the auditorium began to stand up. LGBT students, allied teachers, parents of LGBT children. And they began to applaud. Slowly at first, then louder, until the entire auditorium was standing, giving Gabriel a standing ovation. Pastor Josue looked around, realizing he was alone. Even his own church members seemed uncomfortable. This isn't over, he growled, and stormed off. But it was over, because for the first time Gabriel had confronted his father and won. Not with anger or violence, but with truth. After the lecture, we went to celebrate at my father's house. Sophia had made a cake, terribly decorated, but the thought was what counted. You were amazing today, my father said, squeezing Gabriel's shoulder. Your mother would be proud. Gabriel smiled. She's coming to visit me next week. We're gonna try family therapy. That's great, Sophia exclaimed, licking the frosting off the cake. And it was great, because despite everything, Gabriel was choosing not to let hatred consume him. He was choosing to heal, to forgive, even if slowly, to move on. That night, lying in my bed in separate rooms, as my father had demanded, but Gabriel always ended up in my room when he had nightmares, we talked about everything and nothing. Do you think it will ever get easy? Gabriel asked softly. Being LGBT in a country like, well, you know, honestly, I don't know. I traced patterns on his arm. But I think each generation makes it a little easier for the next. And maybe by telling our story, we'll help someone in the future. Like your blog helps people now. Exactly. He turned to look at me. Lucas, have you thought about the future? Like the very future? Like where? Like us. 10 years from now. 20. What do you imagine? I thought for a moment. I imagine you being a famous architect, building incredible buildings. I imagine myself, I don't know, maybe a psychologist or something, helping LGBT youth. I imagine us living together, having a dog. You always wanted a dog. I imagine us old and boring, arguing about which movie to watch on Netflix. Gabriel laughed. Sounds perfect. Sounds perfect. I kissed his forehead. And you? What do you imagine? The same thing. He nestled his head against my chest. Just with less drama than these last few years. Well, drama is part of the package when you're dating me. I accept the whole package. He yawned. Including your smelly socks and your habit of quoting random statistics. Hey, my statistics are fascinating. They're annoying. You love me anyway. Unfortunately, yes. We remained silent, only the sound of our synchronized breathing. Then Gabriel murmured, half asleep. Thank you. Why? For saving me. I didn't save you, Gabriel. I hugged him closer. You saved yourself. I was only there to hold your hand. He smiled against my chest and fell asleep. And as I looked at the ceiling, I thought about how far we had come. From fear to love. From repression to freedom. From sin to redemption. No, wait, it was never sin. It was always love. Only love. 5 years had passed since that fateful Sunday at the Pentecostal Church of Souls Rescue. Much had changed. Gabriel had graduated in architecture with honors. His undergraduate thesis project, an LGBT community center, had won national awards. He now worked at a renowned firm and did volunteer work designing safe spaces for LGBT youth. I had graduated in psychology and was finishing my specialization in religious trauma and LGBT affirmative therapy. My master's thesis? LGBT youth in evangelical contexts. Narratives of survival and resilience. Gabriel had been my first interviewee. And the Pentecostal Church of Souls Rescue? It had closed. After all the complaints and the exodus of members, Pastor Josue had been forced to shut down. He had tried to open another church in another city, but his reputation followed him. Eventually, I heard that he had given up on ministry altogether. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't feel satisfied either. Just nothing. He no longer had power over us. Gabriel's mother, Raquel, now had a cordial relationship with her son. It wasn't perfect. Some wounds were too deep to heal completely, but they talked. She came to dinner once a month. She had apologized countless times, and Gabriel had forgiven. Not forgotten, but forgiven. She had even started attending an inclusive church, one of the many that had sprung up to welcome LGBT Christians and their allies. I'm relearning my faith, she had said at one of those dinners, discovering that God is greater than I was taught. And in June of that year, Gabriel and I did something we never would have imagined possible 5 years ago. We got married. The ceremony was small, intimate, at my father's house, in the garden he had meticulously tended. There were only 30 people, close friends, chosen family, people who had supported us on the journey. Sophia was my maid of honor. It's about time you made it official, she had joked. She was in college now, studying law with a focus on LGBT rights. Someone needs to sue these idiot pastors, she always said. Gabriel's mother was there, silently crying in the front row. My father was beside her, having become something of a father figure to Gabriel over the years as well. We didn't have a pastor or priest. Instead, my old sociology professor, the one who had forced me to do the church work, officiated the ceremony. It's my fault you two met, she had laughed when we asked. It's only fair that I marry you off. And when the moment of the vows arrived, Gabriel held my hands and said, Lucas Ferreira, 5 years ago you came into my life as a school project. And you transformed everything. You taught me that love is not a sin, that being who I am is not a shame, that I deserve happiness. You stood by my side when I lost everything. You held me up when I crumbled. You reminded me who I was when I forgot. And today, I promise to do the same for you. In joy and sorrow, in health and sickness, in faith and doubt. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, always. I was crying. Completely. I didn't even try to hide it. When my turn came, I took a deep breath. Gabriel Mendes, you were the pastor's son, and I, supposedly, the unforgivable sin. But the truth is, you were never theirs. You were always yours, always free, and you taught me that love is brave, that resistance is sacred, that our stories matter. So today I promise, I will be your safe haven. I will remind you of your strength when you forget. I will love every version of you, the one that doubts, the one that is afraid, the one that dreams, the one that wins. Because you are not my redemption project. You are my home. There wasn't a dry eye when we exchanged rings. Simple silver rings with our initials engraved. And when the teacher said, "You may kiss the newlyweds," Gabriel pulled me in and gave me the longest, most dramatic, most ridiculously cinematic kiss in the history of weddings. The party continued late into the night. We danced. We laughed. We ate cake. Sophia had learned to cook. Thank God. And at one point, while Gabriel was chatting animatedly about a new project, I just watched. This man, this incredible man who had survived so much, who had rebuilt himself from scratch, who had transformed pain into purpose. This man was my husband. My father appeared beside me, following my gaze. "Your mother would have loved him," he said softly. "I know. And she would be so proud of you, of the man you've become." I looked at my father. He had a few more wrinkles, more gray hair, but the same gentle smile. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for welcoming us, for not judging, for..." Shoo! He pulled me into a hug. That's what families do. Real families. Later that night, back in our apartment, small, but ours, Gabriel and I were on the balcony looking at the stars. "So, husband," I said, testing the word, "how do you feel?" "Officially legal," he joked. Then he got serious. "Honestly, I feel whole. For the first time in my life, I feel completely whole. Even after everything, especially after everything." He turned to me. "Because everything I've been through, all the struggles, all the wounds, they brought me here. To you, to us. And I wouldn't change a thing. Not even your father kicking you out?" He thought for a long moment. "No, because if that hadn't happened, I'd still be hiding. I'd still be lying. I'd still be living someone else's life." He took my hand. "Sometimes the worst day of your life leads to the best chapter." That was deep. Are you becoming a philosopher? I'm married to a psychologist. It's inevitable. We laughed, and the sound echoed through the quiet night. "Lucas," Gabriel said after a moment, "do you remember that conversation? About the future? Way back at the beginning?" "I remember. We got there. We made it. And he was right. We had made it. Against all odds, against all the hate, against all the prejudice, we had built this. A life, a love, family. You know what's funny?" I said. "That church wanted us to believe that being gay was a curse, that love between men was a sin, that we were going to burn in hell. And they were wrong. About everything." I looked into his eyes. "Because if heaven exists, it's right here, right now. You and me. This is paradise." Gabriel smiled. That smile that had won me over 5 years ago and still made my heart race. "So I guess we're sinners in paradise. The best kind of sinner." He kissed me under the stars, and in that moment everything made sense. All the pain, all the struggle, every tear, because it took us there. And there it was perfect. This story is for every LGBT youth growing up in hostile religious environments. You are not a wrong thing in God's eyes. You are not sin. You are not broken or wrong or sick. You are human. You are valid. You deserve love, especially self-love. And if today you are in that secret garden, hiding who you are, afraid of what would happen if someone found out, know this: there is life on the other side of fear. There is happiness beyond the chains that try to bind you. There is a community waiting to welcome you. It may not seem possible now. It may seem like you are alone. But you are not. There are thousands of us. Survivors. Fighters. Lovers. And we promise, it gets better. Not easy, but better. And you deserve that better. You always have.